Welcome to the Douglas Murray channel. In today's discussion, Douglas Murray and Cenk Uygur take on one of the most heated debates of our time, the conflict in Gaza. Millions have watched them express their views separately, but tonight, they join us for the first time to tackle the most pressing questions surrounding this conflict. Let's dive into their perspectives on how this war might end, Israel's response, and the future of Gaza and Palestine.
Douglas Murray and Cenk Uygur are on bitterly opposing sides of a debate on Israel's war in Gaza. Millions have watched them passionately articulate their cases on this show, but never together. So tonight, on our final show of the year, we've invited these two big brains to debate the big outstanding questions on this conflict. How does the war end? Will Israel face repercussions for the scale of its response to October the 7th? Has it committed war crimes? What is the future, if any, for Hamas, for Gaza, and for the prospects of a true Palestinian state? Most importantly, how do we get to peace? Well, I'm now joined by the author of The War on the West, Douglas Murray, and by Young Turks founder and Democratic presidential challenger, Cenk Uygur. Welcome to both of you. So I've interviewed you both a lot in this war, but not together. And Cenk, I know you felt the other night when you were debating with other people, it didn't really get into a debate, and I think that's fair enough. And what I'd like to today really is to be almost a referee, if you like, between you two to articulate your views and to see if we can reach any points of consensus. So in that spirit, let me start with you, Douglas. I think you're back in Israel. Is that right?
Yes, I'm in Israel tonight, yeah.
Today it was a sea of other stories have come out in the last few days, which have been concerning, I think. For anyone who, like me, believes that Israel has not just a moral duty to defend itself, but has a fundamental right to do so after what happened on October the 7th. And I've said that clearly from the start. It's always been, for me, the issue of proportionality. And it seems that in the last few days, there have been a number of incidents which really question whether Israel is being precise, as it says it is, or indiscriminate. And I would cite the killing of the 3 hostages. I would cite the killing of the 2 women outside the Catholic Church. I would cite the President of the United States saying that they're using indiscriminate bombing, and so on. Do you, Douglas, notwithstanding your full throttle support of Israel, does anything that's been happening make you think Israel needs to execute this war differently?
No, and I think that most of the people who think they know how to execute this war
Douglas Murray and Cenk Uygur are here to debate Israel's war in Gaza, each bringing their passionate viewpoints. Key questions include, how does the war end? Will Israel face repercussions for its actions? Douglas Murray starts by defending Israel's right to defend itself, citing recent events. How can we balance the moral duty of self-defense with the responsibility of minimizing civilian casualties?
have never executed a war. Indeed, most people who think they know how the IDF should be running this conflict have never been near a conflict. I'm in Israel tonight. I was in Gaza again yesterday. And the examples that you give, by the way, Piers, I don't see why they show any need to prosecute the war itself differently. I mean, just to take one of them, the first example you give, the absolutely tragic, awful shooting of these 3 hostages as they were coming out. But, you know, some of the spin that's been put on that in the world, apart from the glee, of course, that Israel's enemies can't help expressing, some of the spin on that is almost as if it shows the IDF is sort of so brutal that it even kills Hamas hostages who are Israeli. I just think this is another example of the international media and others just having this astounding lack of empathy for the Israeli people. Can you imagine what it was like for those soldiers who were in Gaza, knowing that at any point there were snipers, there are booby traps everywhere, people coming out of tunnels that they've built at British and American taxpayer expenses and attacking them? Can you imagine what it was like for the soldiers who, in that terrible moment, made the life-changing mistake of shooting 3 people who turned out to be Hamas hostages?
But why would they? But Douglas, on that, why would they shoot anyone who was shirtless and waving an SOS flag? I mean, why would whoever they were, whether they were Israeli hostages or whether they thought they were Palestinians, why would anyone shoot anyone who comes out like that? That's my point.
That'll be a matter for the inquiry into it. But, you know, look, it's hardly as if they'd have wanted to have done that. What this demonstrates is, in this incredibly close conflict, in a heavily built-up area, with people coming out from all sides, firing, shooting, detonating, people make mistakes. Of course they do. That's just a human reality of war, horrible as it is. I don't think it shows in any way that Israel is prosecuting this war wrongly. As for the main issue of the war is to destroy Hamas. No Israeli of left or right or centre believes anymore after October the 7th that they can live beside Hamas. Hamas has been given the statelet of Gaza. It was given it in 2006, voted in, then killed their fellow Palestinians in a coup, killed Fatah rivals, and they've run the Gaza for almost 18 years now. And they've produced a new generation of people whose main aim in life, it seems, according to their textbooks and their classes, is to regard Jews as enemies who should be killed. This is just an unbelievable waste, a waste of life on every side. But apart from anything else, a waste of those Palestinian lives, of children who grew up under Hamas's rule, if you can call it that, who have been indoctrinated into becoming sociopaths by...
Douglas Murray challenges the idea that Israel needs to change its strategy despite tragic incidents. He emphasizes the difficulties soldiers face in combat situations, defending their actions. The conversation explores the complexity of warfare in densely populated areas. How do we judge soldiers' actions in the fog of war, and what constitutes acceptable collateral damage?
All right, Douglas, respond to that.
Several things. First of all, anyone who uses the term genocide in this context simply doesn't know what they're talking about, or is a malevolent actor. I don't know if Mr. Uyghur's travelled at all in his life, how far he's travelled, how many conflicts he's seen, but I'd have guessed none. And you clearly know nothing about this particular conflict, and you've obviously seen none of it. The genocide that you describe is such a smear and a libel against the Jewish state. If Israel wanted to commit genocide, I'm sure it could, but it doesn't. It doesn't remotely want to. And people like you and other pro-Palestinian propagandists have spent years claiming that Israel is committing genocide in the Gaza. By the way, the weirdest thing about this claim is that the population of the Gaza has grown by 1 million in the last 15 or so years. So if Israel was trying to carry out a genocide, it's either the worst perpetrator of genocide ever or uniquely poor at performing that task. None of the stats support that ridiculous claim. It's such a weird smear and a libel of Israel. Secondly, of course, you've just rattled off Hamas figures, as every one of your kind always does. Thirdly, you said that the world cried. You said that the people like you who cover for the Palestinian extremists. Thirdly, you said that the world cried out for the 36 Israeli dead children. No, they didn't, and you know that very well. You know that very well. If you put up a poster to a missing dog in any Western city, that poster stays up. In city after city in America, posters of abducted Jewish children, including a 10-month-old baby, were put up and were ripped down by people who have been indoctrinated into hate of Jews. Nobody would rip down the poster of a missing dog, but from Dublin to Berkeley, they ripped down posters of abducted Jewish children. So no, I don't think there was
Douglas,
very much care for that around the world.
Let me put this to you, Douglas.
Let me make two other very quick points. Firstly, you said what Hamas might do, as if it was some kind of hypothetical. Hamas showed what they do, what they want to do. It showed it on October the 7th, and its leadership, as I'm sure you very well know, said that they would like to repeat that again and again until they have got rid of every Jew. So, I don't know. I would trust Hamas's word on that rather than your interpretation of what you think they mean when they say that, and your generous interpretation of what you think that means. And finally, as for preventing a Palestinian state, it is nonsense that the Israelis have prevented a Palestinian state. They gave the Gazans a Palestinian state in 2005. They gave them a Palestinian state in 2005 when every Jewish person was ripped from their homes in the Gaza by IDF soldiers. And the Palestinian people were given a state. And what did they do? They voted in Hamas.
Murray refutes claims of genocide, pointing to population growth in Gaza as contradictory evidence. He criticizes pro-Palestinian propagandists for spreading misleading narratives. The debate touches on the international response to the conflict and the biases within media coverage. How can we ensure that media coverage of conflicts is fair and balanced? And what are the consequences of bias?
Who then killed their fellow Palestinians, never had another election, and used all the billions of dollars of taxpayer funds from the US, UK, and Europe to build terror tunnels and to enrich themselves so they could live the life of luxury in Qatar. Again and again, the reason there is not a Palestinian state is because the Palestinian leadership doesn't want one.
Okay, Douglas,
didn't want one in 1947,
right,
it preferred war, and it doesn't want one now.
Douglas, let me put one point to you raised by Queen Rania of Jordan in a new piece for, I think it was the Washington Post. In just over 2 months, she said Israel's turned Gaza into a hellscape. At least 8,000 children have died, more than the death tolls of Pearl Harbor, September the 11th, and Hurricane Katrina combined. These are gigantic and horrendous numbers of children being killed. Do you not have any qualms about the number of children being killed? I mean, does it not suggest that Israel...
I want to hear Queen Rania talking about this as much as I want to hear Queen Camilla or Meghan Markle. I mean, it's pathetic. Queen Rania is holding on to her own position in Jordan. The only piece of advice she has for anyone is how to marry a king. Queen Rania herself is just playing a very nasty political game. If she cared at all, and I would pose this to all the states in the region, if Jordan cared at all for the Palestinian people, they would take them in.
Right,
they would
Cenk,
take them in.
They
don't want them. If the Egyptians wanted them, they'd take them in, but they don't. Do you know why? Because every country that takes in the Palestinians gets terror. It happened in Egypt, it happened in Jordan, it happened in Syria, it happened in Lebanon, it happened in Tunisia, on and on. That's why these people don't really care about their fellow Muslims. They just care about hating.
Murray addresses the claim of a high Palestinian death toll, attributing responsibility to Hamas. He argues that regional countries do not support Palestinians due to the associated risks. The discussion raises questions about the role of neighboring countries in the Palestinian plight. What responsibilities do neighboring countries have in addressing the Palestinian refugee crisis and supporting peace efforts?
More civilians in Gaza, and it's going to drive out Hamas.
Okay, let Douglas
Let me answer that.
Let Douglas respond to that.
First of all, I mean, your other guest, I mean, I don't know what kind of a creature he is. He's a kind of low-grade thug, as far as I can see. He's listened to nothing I've said.
Yeah, I know, because I'm Muslim. That's what you call all Muslims.
I'll tell you. No, it's not that at all. It's not that at all. I just think that I think you're just a very low-rent racist. But anyway, let me just get on to it. You say first of all, I don't care about the death of Palestinian children. Yes, I do care. I care very deeply about it. But I also know that the responsibility for their deaths lies on Hamas, which has misgoverned their society for the last 16 years and now has been leading the country into being in a war with Israel. So yes, it's on Hamas this. As for seeing wars, by the way, I just mentioned about seeing wars because as far as I can see, you're very ill-travelled as well as rather ill-lettered and ill-spoken. And I mention that I cover wars and go to wars because I happen to think myself that it's worth seeing things with your own eyes, including things that you don't particularly like, but you report the truth. I don't know if you ever even leave your own bedroom. And I can tell already that you don't because you've already said something that demonstrates you know nothing about this conflict. You have just demonstrated it in the following terms. You said that this is why we need to push for a two-state solution and give legitimacy to the Palestinian Authority. I'll tell you something you don't know because I guess you spent no time in the West Bank, have you? I'll tell you something you probably don't know. The Palestinian Authority, Fatah, celebrated the 7th of October massacres. I'll give you another fact which demonstrates you know nothing about this and clearly haven't ever visited any Palestinians in the West Bank as I have. If there was an election tomorrow in the West Bank, the reason why there isn't one is because if there was an election tomorrow in the West Bank, Hamas would win. So your idea of a two-state solution, I'm afraid you are so out of date and you really should leave your bedroom. Because in this region, nobody thinks that there is a two-state solution on the table because there is not a viable negotiating partner. But I just want to make one other main point. You have gone on and on tonight, throwing accusations out against the Jewish state, against me. It's the sort of thing you do. I know you're a sort of online pugilist and think you can run for office, and good luck with that. But I'd just like to point out that you only really get animated if the Jews are involved. And I can tell that for the following reason. I mean, your surname's Uyghur, isn't it? 1 million Uyghur Muslims in China have been put in concentration camps in the last decade. And people of your ilk never really care about that, do you? Because it's not the Jews doing it, it's the Chinese Communist Party. At the moment, 1 million people who are in Pakistan at the moment, who are your fellow Muslims and who happen to be Afghan, and I don't think you care about them, do you? 1 million Afghans are currently being forcibly deported from Pakistan to Afghanistan. You don't care about that. You're not riled up about that. You're not riled up about what the Janjaweed are currently doing in Sudan, where thousands and thousands of people are being attacked by the Islamist militia there. You don't care about any of that. You get exercised and you rile up what little base you have of malcontents because you're riled.
Murray vehemently defends Israel, highlighting global double standards and selective outrage. He points out the lack of attention to other humanitarian crises compared to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The conversation delves into the reasons behind selective activism and global conflict responses. Why do certain conflicts receive more international attention and activism than others, and how does this affect global justice? Thank you for joining us on the Douglas Murray channel. Today's discussion brought to light many challenging questions and diverse perspectives on the conflict in Gaza. We hope this debate has sparked deeper thinking and understanding. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insightful discussions. Until next time, stay informed and engaged.